Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from a baguette shop on the corner. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a good episode for you today. A little bit of a bummer when we'll discuss the upcoming or not so upcoming Emilia Romagna Grand Prix this weekend. But as always, we've got some quick hitters, some F1, League of Legends, Magic the Gathering. The whole gang's here. And Justin, part of the gang, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I would argue if this were a hierarchy, you'd probably be somewhere on my left or on my right, sharing this space here, top of the team, top of the podium. Good to see you too, my friend. Now, man, I was trying to work in a chip damage joke right there. Yeah. It just fell apart. Good to see you, my friend. Happy to be back for another week. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Why don't you start us off with our Rose, Thorn, and Seed here?
Yeah, sounds good. So for my Rose this week, it's actually something from work today. It was, I had this lady call yesterday, wanted to set up a tour for one of my furnished apartments. We're chatting, she's explaining her situation and all, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, like, come out, do a tour tomorrow. I'll, like, let me know what time works and all. And so we set up the tour. She comes in, super friendly lady. I take her around, show her everything. I was like, do you have any questions or anything? And we're just like chatting. I basically was just like, yeah, with the furnished apartments, I know that, like, the reason people are coming to them is not always the most exciting, or there's a lot of other stuff going on that's causing the situation. So I was like, I will do my best to make this as smooth and easy of a process as possible for, like, moving in, getting all the paperwork and everything together. And she basically was like, oh, like, I really appreciate that. And also, by the way, when I, like, was looking up the property in the reviews, she was like, your name came up a ton. And so that made me feel really, like, comfortable with coming out and doing the tour and all. And so I was just like, I like occasionally see those things here and there when, something comes through, but it was a really nice feeling to, like, know that not just like, oh, like, the staff are really not, but that people have taken the time to compliment me with those reviews. That's, like, it just feels good. Because that means I'm, like, doing my job right and doing it well in my mind, if these people are happy and good. So that was a nice little rose from today. My thorn and my seed kind of tie together a little bit, so I'll lead off with my seed, but I decided on a whim after this past weekend. We were hanging out with Colleen's family. They had mentioned that one of her one sister-in-law had signed up for this 5-mile race nearby, and I was like, oh, like, is like the sign up still open and everything? And they're like, oh, usually it, like, fills up really quick and yada yada. So I checked it out and just on a whim decided, like, saw that registration was still open, so I signed up, like, for it. It's next month. But I was like, I have been trying to run a little bit more and everything and get into the swing of things, build up my endurance again and all. So doing that, I'm, like, looking forward to it. I got a run in the other day. I'm looking to keep doing that probably 2-3 times a week, nothing crazy, but to get some good exercise, because it's just good for me in general. And so having that carrot dangled in front of me as motivation, I think is pretty good. I don't want to, after all of my years of running, I don't want to go and do this race in front of Colleen's family and make a fool of myself. So I got to make sure I'm kicking myself into shape. But
well, yeah, and I would argue if you don't get first, you just make a fool out of yourself anyway, no matter who's watching.
Well, if you're not first, you're last. So
Exactly. But yeah, no. A serious question I wanted to ask: is there a like training goal that you're gonna like kind of include to work towards that goal? Because obviously you've been like taking steps to help, make that 5 miles like a little bit of an easier experience. But is there something that you'll add in to say like, all right, well now that I'm intentionally training for something, I'll do it this way?
Um, Not too much. Most of this right now is just I want to build up my running endurance again. So that's kind of my main goal with this is I wanted motivation to get out and do this more because
Mm-hmm.
I talked with my buddy Shane. Um, he ran a half marathon out in Pittsburgh the other weekend and was really hyped on it afterwards. And it was talking about some future half marathons and whatnot. And so it would be pretty awesome for me after the different knee problems and everything that I've had to potentially be able to work my way up to doing something like that. So that's
Right.
kind of a long term goal, but this is like that short term kind of here. Let's get to this level first. And I mean, I don't have any general like pace goals for myself, but
Gotcha.
I typically run at the same pace ish, no matter
Sure.
how like it doesn't or so far at least it hasn't really mattered how long I've gone without running. I'll just go out and go about 8 minute mile pace and like
Okay.
it'll tail off as I go further and further a little bit. Just as I get tired towards the end of those runs. But I think in general, that's kind of would be my goal pace at the moment to if I can keep it right around there
Hmm.
for this race and everything, or generally in that ballpark, I would feel pretty content at least with how I'm doing. So
Okay. Very cool.
but yeah, no real set training regimen. I mostly just want to get out, start building up the miles, and get up to some of these longer runs.
Hmm.
But my thorn was mostly just some tightness and whatnot. I also did a little bit of a calisthenics workout earlier this week up on our rooftop, and I just have, and I'm gonna like it's frustrating having to research how to like fix things. Like I wish that just my general normal stretching, like my hip flexors after running for the past couple days have just been super tight, not painful,
Hmm.
which is the good thing, but just really tight. And
Hmm.
I stretched them out. I've done like isolated stretching to work on them. I've used the foam roller. I've like done these things. I stretch every time that I like work out and all. I could probably do a little more stretching just like even on days that I don't work out.
Hmm.
But in general, like I don't think that I am like I think I'm like probably in the middle of like not stretching enough and stretching like a really good amount. I'm like somewhere in the or stretching like the
Sure.
best amount. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, which for my whole life has been decent enough to keep me
Hmm.
kind of going. So between that, the calisthenics workout, I had some shoulder tightness in my left shoulder and all. Um, that I wasn't able to really hit very well with some of the different stretches that I've been doing. So it's just yeah, a little bit of frustration trying to figure out how to work on these things because the normal things that I'm doing just aren't quite cutting it.
Hmm.
It's annoying to have to put effort into stretching to just like I feel like I know stretching's good for you, but to me, stretching is mostly just the precursor to whatever activity I'm doing as opposed
Right.
to its own thing. So the fact that I'm having to put more effort into like figuring out that portion of it that I don't
Hmm.
even fully feel like is my goal of what I'm doing is a little annoying that it's that tedious. So not like a insane thorn, but just kind of a little annoying for myself and like my mindset. So maybe it's a mindset thing that I have to kind of shift a little bit or something.
To be fair, I don't think you're alone. I hear this sentiment like a decent amount from the like more active clients that we have where yeah, stretching just ends up becoming like the least interesting aspect of the routine, but it ends up kind of being a pretty crucial part, especially once you get to these longer runs and when you do have like chronic, long-standing issues. Um, the the stretches that you want to look at, I guess, have to be like a little more specific than just like general glute, general ham, general quad, general shoulder. Uh, but yeah, just all things to think about. Just to say, like, yeah, you're not alone. I hear this a lot, but
I appreciate it because it's yeah, it's not that I like dislike stretching, but
mhm.
it is kind of like the appetizer to the main course for me. Like
Fair, fair.
it's like I do it because I know that it's part of it and like I know that it's good to do.
Hmm.
But it's not that enticing or as enticing as like just getting on. But I still make sure I'm taking the right amount of time and doing it.
Of course.
So that's like kind of the frustration.
But also, what you're hitting at is the like 25 minutes that you had to spend on Google trying to like describe the right area of your body for it to like feed you back like a good stretch to do.
Yeah.
I understand you in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not the fun part.
No, not at all. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you kind of validating how I feel a bit,
Of
even
course.
though knowing yeah, I'm going to have to do that legwork. It's gonna
Sure.
be annoying, but once I've done it, hopefully I'll be in a good position where I'll just be able to do that or whatever I figure out is the best way to stretch those muscles out to be able to just like consistently do those a bit more.
Hmm.
So, but I digress. That's my rose, thorn, and seed for this week. But let's hear it from you. Let's have you tell the people what your rose, thorn, and seed is for this week. That was a
Nice.
terrible
Will
transition.
do. So my seed here this week is me and Sarah have been at this is more of like a been more of like a trial period, probation period, test period, but we've been utilizing social media for the business a little bit more, just like in very simple ways, not doing anything crazy, not trying to like push limits or like go above and beyond what we think is possible. But utilizing some posts here and there, and it's been interesting to see the feedback. There's a bunch of clients that are kind of able to spread the word a little bit better, and we're actually seeing some like pretty good interaction, pretty good engagement on the pages. So
Nice. Is
that
that
has
mostly
been
like Facebook or are you
just Facebook right
okay?
now,
I mean,
and then we'll look to
honestly,
incorporate Google as well because that's like that tends to be where it's at. But
yeah,
yeah.
but Facebook is probably I would imagine between that and Google, Facebook is probably your prime platform for advertising and everything. People, it's very different from like other social medias where people are following like on Instagram, their friends to see pictures of what they're doing or whatever, or
Hmm.
celebrities or whatnot, or Twitter, where you're like, I use Twitter mostly for like news about sports or politics or whatever else
Hmm.
there that like intrigues me. But Facebook is like that I feel like that's the perfect like niche for that kind of thing because that people like let me share that yeah like
Hmm.
I'll people will get long-winded on Facebook about what's going on and if they have had some sort of muscle pain or issue or anything one the older generations probably have already posted about those issues that they've had on Facebook. And then if they see your page and have gone to you and gotten worked on and everything, they could be like, oh yeah, like this has helped me with this blah 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 that I said, and you have all the friends, the family. It's like that is the wheelhouse, I think, for that social media engagement for your business. It makes sense.
Yeah, and that much has been apparent. So we've been really enjoying the feedback. So that's pretty cool. And then my thorn here for the week, just I don't want to get into the details,
All right.
but massive headache over the weekend. I get a call from a doctor's office that I have like ongoing appointments with, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, like you don't have health insurance. I don't know what you want us to do." I'm like, and obviously, like I'm not upset with them, but my immediate reaction is like, well, what the fuck happened? But she can't tell me that. She's just the messenger.
Right. She's just we sent this to the insurance people and they were like,
Right.
nope, sorry.
Right. So like
Gotcha.
long story short, many phone calls. I figured out what the source of the issue was. Bro, I for the first time in my life, when I say to you I went nuclear, it actually like is not as bad as that sounds, but bro, I was just like, what the fuck? Like
Yeah.
literally inconceivable. So
Was
I'm
it
just
anything that you had done that
no.
it was
Nope.
just all
Nope.
on their end?
All on another end, I'll say.
Okay.
And
Well, that's
and
fucked.
just yeah, and just like a whole weekend, a whole like front half of the week, I'm just finding out today after putting in the request, talking to multiple people, and God bless them because like they helped. They actually like they came through for me where I was able to like plead my case to them in like a clear, concise fashion and I was able to get it reinstated. They let me know today that like, yeah, yeah, we turned it back on. We figured out the problem. Like, don't worry. As you know, like we'll keep it moving. So now I'm all good
Nice.
moving forward. But my lord, it was it has to be the most upset I've been in like a really long time. But and this is why I started with gratefulness because like had it had it not be for those doctor's appointments, I would be like actually through the roof, like actually a volcano.
Yeah.
So bro, wild stuff. Just happy I have health insurance.
Yep.
Thank you to Uncle Sam or whoever, but we're rocking. And then my rose here for the week. We had a great client give a gift to Sarah. She appreciates her very much. So we have one free ticket to a couple of entrees for a restaurant around, and so
Nice.
we're gonna cash that in on Saturday. Get a couple entrees for lunch, and call it kind of a date day or whatever.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so I think that'll be a good time. But yeah, that's my little shortened rose, thorn, and seed here.
Oh, it's funny how our roses kind of coincide a little bit with the
Yes, sir.
the appreciation also. Very cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that you got sorry, my allergies have been like getting me today pretty much all day, but the yeah, like getting for you and Sarah that like positive feedback and everything about the hard work that you guys do and everything for your business, that's always that's awesome. So
Hmm.
so definitely enjoy that this weekend. But we'll move on into the meat of the podcast this week. So getting into some quick hitters, we this past weekend there was the IndyCar GMR Grand Prix, which happens at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but not on the oval track. It's on a like road track that they have there. In I think it like goes through sort of the infield and whatnot of what would be the infield during the Indy 500 and also
Gotcha.
so pretty good race. Nothing too crazy to write home about for Grosjean. He had a fine race, finished P11, so kind of towards the middle of the field. Marcus Ericsson was up in P8, but Alex Palou ends up getting the victory. He led most of the laps of the race. It was his first win in quite some time. He had a pretty long drought, and I'm going to see how long that actually was.
But getting good results notwithstanding, though, correct? Like, he was still racing at the front of the field, getting like, a good amount of points.
Yes, and including the fact that this win put him up into first in the current IndyCar standings. So, to the point that, he has had a very successful season, even without, or with this being his first win this year. He had no wins at all in 2022. One win in 2022. So it was a little ways back that he had gotten his last win. But for someone being like at the top of the standings, definitely a surprise that he had that longer kind of drought there.
Yeah. But so IndyCar is a spec series, right? So they're all racing the same parts, barring engines
and setup differences and like tire strategy. Yeah.
Yes, gotcha. But I just say it to say, so kind of at the top of the field when it can be kind of anybody's race at the top of the field, depending on what happens with like pit strategies and stuff. It's not really surprising that he doesn't get a win, but cool that he's been able to compete at the top. But this is the race where, wasn't it Lundgaard that started on pole?
Yeah, so Christian Lundgaard, young driver, started on pole, but he got overtaken by Palou by the end of the first lap, actually. Yeah. So Palou ends up leading after the first lap for a good, decent stretch there. I think he was on a different tire strategy than Lundgaard was, so it made it a little easier for him to get by early on, but then, of course, drove a really clean race and everything throughout to make it to the checkered flag and all.
Well, and he had to get I'm pretty sure Lundgaard was leading, I think it was like 13 or 14 laps. 13, and I think that was just based on, that was just pit timing. So Palou had to make the overtake again, which I just said to say that was likely a tire strategy thing where, he was just kind of quicker on the day, being able to get it done twice, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, so nice race from Palou there, and like I said, leading the standings. We've got him, then Pato O'Ward in second, Marcus Ericsson in third, and then Grosjean actually jumped up to fourth with his finish. He because Scott McLaughlin finished down in P16, ends up jumping up from fifth place to fourth place from the last IndyCar race. So Grosjean moving up the standings, I think, in a spot where he probably should be. So nice to see him having some success as always. But big congrats to Alex Palou there in the IndyCar GMR Grand Prix there at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And then, of course, as I had mentioned the other week, we have the Indy 500 coming up. I'm definitely planning to check it out. So it is it this weekend?
No, it's next weekend.
Okay, I was about to say. I was like, you're doing that, and I
fool. Yeah, they fooled you.
Yeah, big time. But
no, believe me, I checked because I was like, oh, I mean, if
I thought it was at the end of the month. Yeah,
I'll check in, but now it'll be next weekend, not next weekend.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to the Indy 500. I'm definitely excited to check it. I've watched parts of it. I think last year I came in partway through, but I do plan to kind of set some time aside to watch that for a bit this year and everything, since I've been following IndyCar a bit more closely. Speaking though of racing in America,
Mm-hmm.
David Coulthard, in an interview, said that he thinks that the U.S. should have 4 F1 races in the future. He said based on just the land mass and size of the U.S. and everything. And so my question I want to kind of pose is, what where do you think like might be, and this is like a very broad question. I've been trying to think through it, but like
Mm-hmm.
the idea behind my question is like, where should they host a race? Because it's not, I don't like the idea of just every race in the US being like, oh, let's put it in this city and do a street circuit. Let's put it in New York City and have the street circuit go through Times Square. And oh
Right.
my God, we get to see
Right.
all the, like, the US and racing in the US doesn't have to just be a spectacle to show off all these cities that everyone around the world has seen movies and pictures and videos and like whatever of for years and years and years. Like, I would love personally to see them race on a just standard track, kind of like Circuit of the Americas is, where it's a track that was created for racing. We're not building a racetrack on streets that have already been there just to create a spectacle at some big city. Like, I'd love to see them potentially race at an IndyCar track or a circuit that IndyCar goes to, and kind of utilize some of those other circuits that are throughout the US. Like, pick a big one. Pick this road track at Indianapolis Motor Speedway or something. Like, there's got to be tons and tons and tons of tracks around the US, between different racing series, between IndyCar, between all this. When I read that, the first thing that popped to my mind is like, oh, a New York Grand Prix that's gonna cost fucking like bucks out the wazoo to try and go to and everything. Like, it, yeah, would that be nice because it's close and I could drive there? Sure. But at the same time, like, I don't want a race just for the sake of having a race. I would want it to be on a like good track that's going to provide quality racing, and not just, hey, let's stick it here for the spectacle of it.
So I think the easy answer to your question is Area 51.
Boom. Done.
I think if you do a built to purpose racetrack at Area 51, it would be the bomb. We could drive by spaceships, we could drive by aliens, we could drive by test tubes and beakers. I think that would be sick.
I feel like you're sending me back to like childhood racing video games I played, like the Lego oh, what was that game called? There was like a Lego racing game that I used to play back
Okay.
in the day. It was sick.
Hell
You could
yeah.
like build your own car with like different Lego pieces and all. Awesome game. But anyway, I feel like all the tracks were had all these like weird, bizarre landmarks around. So
Well, that's crazy you say that because that's actually what I thought of when like you asked that was the like my brain shot straight back. I guess it was like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 or 2 where Area 51 was like an unlockable level and you could like hit ramps and stuff and you had to like tag the, you had to like ollie over the spaceships or whatever it was. So that's immediately what I thought of. So that's like that's my funny answer. But via quick Google, it seems like there's a good amount of street tracks in the U.S. That would be kind of not what you would be looking for. Seems like a lot of them have been marred with like actually temperature issues. So it didn't make for a great race. Pretty challenging, even if the course was whatever. But I think temperatures have marred a lot of these races. So the choices have been limited to, a couple of these places. But like you said, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Indianapolis, Indiana. That's a lot of, well, you get it. They've hosted a bunch of times. I guess there used to be a partnership with that race with Formula One. So, like you said, that'd be a place that we could go back to. But one place that does seem interesting is Watkins Glen
Ooh.
International in Watkins Glen, New York. It wouldn't be a street race. It gets you in a state that is, pretty well known. You could tourist trap into New York City, but yeah, I think Watkins Glen would be like a great place for uh, a
I
race.
like that answer. That's a great answer. And they, like you
There
said,
you
I
go.
just pulled them up. They've got a 6 hour race going on coming up pretty soon. They're about a month, and so yeah, that could actually be a really awesome spot. I like the idea of another race in the U.S. Not and like I do understand that like whether it was in the US, whether it was in another part of Canada, whether it's another part of
Mm-hmm.
like Central America, having another race over this side of the world would be pretty neat since we do have so many over in Europe and over in Asia and everything. Um, and with the growing audience, that's great. But I just would hate for it to just be another. Well, let's just do it because at this place because spectacle.
Right.
That just seems kind of like a throwaway race in my mind
Mm-hmm.
in terms
Yeah,
of
and I would tend to
quality.
agree.
So I appreciate the both answers, the fun
Mm-hmm.
and the serious, um, but yeah, I guess we'll have to see. Maybe some of the higher ups there in Formula One will take a listen to the podcast and take some of our thoughts into consideration.
They're gonna
Um,
hear that. They're gonna hear that Area 51 idea and just be like, "Novel, Mister Schmidt, get on it right away."
yes, start building. Um,
Exactly. Give me those golden shovels, break earth. Give me the golden fucking helmet. I want to
if we
like chop a
build it,
banner.
they will come.
They would come. I promise you.
But
It'd be crazy.
that would be an
All the fucking
interesting.
spaceships beaming down to watch the Formula One race.
Oh,
That's what brings international or intergalactic cultures together is racing. Can you imagine?
that would be pretty cool. And imagine the like desert. Like you could have some like concerts out there on the weekend, just crushing some bands, just all in the desert, just
Oh, it'd
like
be great.
headbanging, having a blast. It would be a good time. Um, but to get into some more actual, I guess, and less speculative, well, still speculative F1 news.
Sure.
Helmet Marco came out. He confirmed that Danny Ricciardo would not be, of course, the consideration for AlphaTauri. They have decided if Nick DeVries does get demoted for whatever reason, poor performance, and I think he has. I heard the Spanish Grand Prix was kind of his like deadline for improvement, but then AlphaTauri would look at some of their other young talent that has been driving well in F2, like Liam Lawson or Ayumu Iwasa, who
Mm-hmm.
has been crushing it. It would be awesome to have Iwasa and Yuki Tsunoda pairing. That would be pretty neat. I believe, and I'm gonna double check myself, but I'm pretty sure that Iwasa is Japanese. Um, but I'm gonna double check. Yeah, so he's Japanese racing driver in Formula 2. So it would be kind of neat for AlphaTauri to have a full Japanese lineup after not
Mm-hmm.
having a Japanese driver in F1 for a little while before Yuki came in. Um, so I think that's just in terms of reasonable, well thought out decisions, looking at, hey, we've got this young guy who isn't shaking out like why would we necessarily just like throw the seat to Daniel instead of looking to see if any of our other young talent has that spark that might perform well in F1. So I think that just makes sense for them to look at those young drivers.
Yeah, it seems like Daniel Ricciardo would be the short-term solution where you're just like trying to slot somebody in that might get more points than Nick,
Is
but
plug
if
and
you
play.
pull,
Yeah.
if you pull somebody up, then you may get a more long-term solution. You get to kind of sculpt the driver.
Yeah, and I think that's like kind of the goal with that seat, at least at current moment, is to develop a younger driver and give them some room to grow into F1 and everything. But still on that Red Bull train a little bit. Helmut Marko also was discussing Checo's future. Said that he had signed a 2-year contract, which included this year as well as next year. And based on like how he's driving, there's no reason for anyone to like for it to even come up into conversation, which I appreciated because Checo's having a great year and has started off just really, really hot. So hopefully he continues and we have a little bit of a title fight between him and Max, since the constructors fight is not going to be as exciting. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my favorite boy on the grid.
My boy.
But now I saw just 2 really wild stats over this off week that blew my mind a little bit. So for one, for Max, in his 168 career starts, he has only, in races that he's finished, he has only finished outside of the top 10 5 times out of 168 starts,
Okay.
which is pretty just nutty in general. The other one that I saw was that since Italy 2016, anytime that Max has crossed the finish line, he has always been in the top 10. So he has scored a point in every race that he didn't have a crash, failure. Anytime he's crossed the finish line since 2016, he has been in the point. Since Italy 2016, he has been in the points, which are
Sure.
those are. I think it like stuck with me because those are the kinds of stats that we've like talked about with Lewis Hamilton, and like obviously we've talked about him being one of, if not the GOAT of F1. We were talking all last season about, oh, is he going to get a race win? Is he going to this? Is he going to, because he had gotten a race win every single year he had raced in Formula One. Like, it's crazy. And so those are the kind of stats that I think or kind of eye-opening like things talked about a driver that you can actually start to be like, yeah, like whether on either side, Lewis or Max, like you love them, you hate them, either way, like they're both like really, really great drivers and amazing talents in F1. And that like stuck in my mind as like kind of a cool comparison between the two of like they both have these pretty like wild stats that are just so out there when it comes to like the rest of the drivers on the grid. They're big time outliers in terms of that quality of driver.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild because it's like the difference between like the eye test, just seeing them weekend in, weekend out, and just being like, damn, they're really good. Whoa, look at that overtake. Damn, another podium. Whoa, 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 whoa. But then you actually see it like, yeah, but this is what it looks like if you like write it all down. And some of that's just like, damn, really? Like never outside?
Like it's so crazy. Like he's just never had a bad enough race to not get points since Italy 2016. Like unless he retired or for some reason, just blew my mind.
part
So,
of that conversation is car then too. Like that's really solid reliability from the Red Bull side too.
oh yeah, absolutely.
But the fact that he's racing it that well and with like suboptimal starts as well, there's like back of the grid starts and
Oh yeah.
stuff. So all sorts of little bits of context within that. But yeah, that's a pretty wild stat to hear.
Yeah, and so it kind of wrapping out like my little Red Bull topics that I had, but there was a interview with Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of Formula One, this past week, I believe, where he basically was asked if they are going to make changes to regulations that will kind of reel Red Bull into the rest of the grid. And he essentially said that we can't intervene in the performance of the teams. He doesn't feel, especially in a Formula series, that and so he has only been the F1 CEO since 2021 because I saw a ton of people that are like, well, Formula One like change this thing about Mercedes in this year and this thing about Mercedes and this and this and this to hold Mercedes back and everything. And like, although that may be correct, and some of those I still feel like are a little bit of a stretch, just because things like the DOS system. Yes, I fully get it that Mercedes figured out something with their engineering that was creative, ingenuitive, that helped them perform better than the rest of the drivers. At the same time, though, if you're looking at rule sets and things like that for Formula One, like the ability to basically change your camber and things like that, the more that I've like learned about F1, like that is without something like DOS that you can do it just in the car, that would be basically breaking parc ferme. So like you can't change the camber of the wheels and these that you can't change the setup once the car is into that point of the race weekend and all. So I do understand something like that. Now that I have a greater perspective of Formula One, being like, yeah, like we're not really cool with that, especially since Formula One works with Pirelli to create tires and things like that in general for the racing to be able to work a certain way, have certain amounts of degradation and yada, yada, yada to fit the racing series and all. So with things like that, I understand them. I don't think that was a like specific, like even though it only affected Mercedes, I don't think it was like targeted at Mercedes as like oh, we gotta hold Mercedes back. But yeah, it was just interesting. I saw a lot of backlash about the comment, but at the same time, like I said, he's only been the F1 CEO since 2021. Like he had no part in. He worked for Ferrari before. He had no part in all those changes and things that were made that like supposedly held Mercedes back. When a new CEO comes into a company, like the perspective, the mission, the long-term goals and things like that shift. Like that's what happens when a new person takes the lead of a company. So right. I agree with him in terms of like I have looked even with when Mercedes was dominant. I looked at it and I'm like, they've got the best engineers who are creating the best car, and they have some of the best drivers. That means success. Like that's just the way that this race goes. Like it's a combination. It's not just the drivers out on the track each week. It's the engineer. I mean, we hear the drivers always giving shout outs back to the factory and to the men and women who design these cars and everything and build them and all. Like that's a part of this series, as opposed to, like you said, with IndyCar, where it is a spec series where there are minor changes and all. So I think that comment, it just fits what Formula One's supposed to be. Even though at current and over the past stretch, it has made it less exciting in some way, or less variable, which some people see variation as more exciting than just best quality. If that, I don't know if that last part, like, I think the sentiment came across. It was poorly worded from me, but I think people are more excited by change sometimes than they are by just seeing high quality performance.
Yeah, and there is something odd about, like, aren't you just chasing the dragon then at that point, where, like, okay, well, Red Bull is winning right now, so you gotta write it in something in the rules to, like, make them not as good, and or like
Yeah.
you would have to be, like, writing something in the rules that makes something about their car, like, illegal now.
Yeah.
And then, like, oh no, but, like, now Aston Martin's, like, winning so many races, like, something on their car's got to be illegal. Like, that's a slippery slope, bro.
Oh, absolutely. And I think of it that way. When we had discussed during the off season, there were all these thoughts and ideas being thrown out about, well, like, oh, like, we should hamper the lead car with their aero. It's like, bro, they don't get DRS if they're in the lead. Like, okay, maybe if your concern is, like, the leaders having an advantage and all, maybe you don't get DRS if you're lapping a car. Maybe you only get it if you are, like, coming up behind someone or something. But don't make it like coming up behind someone who is in front of you in positions on the grid, as opposed to just like, oh, I came out and fucking Logan Sargent's, like, just tanking it back here, and Max is getting the DRS on the long straight off of Logan Sargent's Williams. Like, that I would think would make more sense than being like, oh, well, we're gonna, like, make the parts so that we can change the aero to make it harder for them if they're up in front. We're gonna blue shell the front driver. Like, that.
Yeah,
That's
dude,
like,
that's so funny. These people want it to be Mario Kart.
yeah.
There you
And
go.
so when you're looking at it as a series as a whole, like, you're not just, I think just a lot of the backlash, and I have to keep it in mind, a lot of these comments and tweets and whatever else I see in response to this stuff are people who are just watching on race weekends. They're not really considering the whole scope of the racing series, which is kind of the part where I'm like, I have to just keep that in mind and not let it rile me too much. So
Sure, take it with a grain of salt.
yeah, exactly. So talking about Pirelli a little bit, though, they are planning to introduce a new specification of tires for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, where the tires are reinforced and can deal with higher loads like you see at Silverstone. And they're planning to continue to use them through the rest of the season. I just worry that that's going to create more issues like we discussed last time with the Miami Grand Prix, in terms of one-stop races and kind of how that decreases the variability of strategies in general. So I don't know. Just the whole reinforced, capable of dealing with higher loads and things like that just sounds like less degradation in my mind, which I'm like, that's not what, like, I think is. And especially, like, this year we haven't really had safety concerns due to the tires, so I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Like, we haven't had, like we saw in previous years, blowouts out of nowhere, like we saw on some of the long straights at Baku and things like that previously.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't remember any like tire compound shenanigans like specifically, but maybe there have been like a bunch of punctures there to some order greater than like other tracks in some way. But yeah, that is interesting, and I
Well,
think
and
you are
Silverstone, just as like a callback, that was where we had the 3 tire blowouts, including Lewis finishing on 3 tires. We had that race had Lance Stroll, Valtteri Bottas, and Lewis, who all had blowouts during the race and everything from the tire wear. So I understand like that they're concerned that Silverstone with the turns, the high speeds, the whatever else, has like they can obviously calculate that it has higher loads and higher like stress on the tires and all. But I just, in my mind, I'm concerned that the changes they're making are going to just create even less variability than we're already seeing in that tire strategy. So that's where my mind went to it, even though, yes, like I understand that Silverstone does have like more to worry about there, I guess.
yeah.
So
That's where my head goes. I just think like, well, there's probably a reason for it.
yeah, so like it does somewhat make sense. I just I understand the idea. I'm hoping that the implementation doesn't have a number of other side effects that kind of decrease the excitement that we could have with these races, like we discussed with tire strategy and all. Again, always for safety first. So
we don't want excitement. We just want Red Bull to win here on this pod.
Yeah, but still.
Only excitement right up until the point that Max settles my heart rate with a victory.
Yeah, so like first 8 laps of the race or so.
Right.
I just
Yeah,
wanna...
don't keep me out there for too long, bud.
No.
I get nervous on this ledge here, Max. Come on.
Come on. Lap 10 at most. You got to be out there.
Get it done, bud. Come on. You're making me nervous here. Seriously.
Well, and for the last quick hitter, getting before we discuss the non Grand Prix this weekend, but I saw a tweet, and it was I thought was good questions from this gentleman Aldis001, who I've seen a lot pop up in F1 Twitter. But he said, he posed
F1 Twitter follow.
Posed the question, who has been the best driver in the midfield in the first 5 races outside of the top 4 teams? So outside of Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin. I would say Yuki popped into mind.
He is the midfield. He's 10 and 11 every race. Like, I don't know.
I mean, the other one that that came to mind for me was Pierre Gasly. He has impressed me in like a bit of a different way. Like so with Pierre, we saw obviously he's had his moments this season as well. His collision with his teammate at Australia, but outside
that
of
weighs heavy on my mind, bro.
I mean, I completely would understand why it was pretty fucking brutal for the Alpine team, but Pierre has performed well, including just leading Ocon in a number of different races. He's beating him in the driver's standings. I mean, albeit 8 points to 6. Like big difference, but nonetheless, like he's coming into a new team, new car, all these changes and everything for him, where Ocon is that ready, steady. I mean, we're seeing it in some of the other teams that have had shakeups. We're seeing, and like, I guess to compare drivers on a more equal playing field, like Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. Magnussen has like been, I'd say, for the most part, performing better than Hulkenberg, except for I think one race where Hulkenberg got the best of him, and which is why he's up ahead in the standings. But Magnussen, I think 4 out of the 5 races has like qualified better, and I mean, I'd have to double check myself, but Magnussen, I'm pretty sure, has finished higher and qualified better in 4 out of the 5 races than Hulkenberg, and so that's an instance where the incumbent driver with the new guy who has been an F1 driver, albeit not as much over the past couple of years, is showing that they're consistently better than that other new driver coming into the team. Whereas in the Alpine team, Pierre has gotten the best of Ocon more than vice versa, and Ocon is the incumbent driver for them for a couple years now. So
I'm just not sure they are getting overall the results that would warrant them the like best of the midfield.
yeah, well, and I guess more Yuki Tsunoda isn't getting like he's got.
I'm saying he is the midfield. He is in the middle of the field.
He is. You're right. Well, to some extent, he's 16th in the driver's standings out of 20. So, so I guess.
Okay.
So that's where you could say
very twisty.
That's where I guess you could kind of question that, but I do agree. Like, he's finished in the middle of the field in every race. Has been consistent, but that's why I thought it was an interesting question. I mean, Gasly's a good answer. I think Yuki's another good answer. I don't even hate Albon that much. Like, Albon, even though the Williams car has been pretty rough, he has driven solidly, in my opinion. I mean, he DNF'd in Saudi Arabia and Australia, but I'm almost 100% sure that Australia was not his fault. I don't remember Saudi Arabia, if it was off the top of my head, but he finished P10 in Bahrain, P12 in Azerbaijan, P14 in Miami, with a Williams car that Logan Sargent is dragging around 40 seconds behind the 19th place person. So when you look at it from that aspect too, it's like it's kind of like the most valuable player conversation that you have in all these sports. Is it the most valuable, or is it like the best player? So like, are we looking at who's winning the best of the rest in this, or are we looking at like who's the best performing person on their team? Like, if you kind of curve the grades a little bit, where Albon and Yuki get a little bit of a boost to their standings in that aspect because their cars fucking suck.
Well, to be fair, like, the more that I'm thinking about it, I kind of like your Hulkenberg answer, where like he's winning the head-to-head, as you said, and then also like it's in a Haas that for the last however many years have like been out of the conversation. So he's like up there getting points for this team. I actually kind of like that answer, to where it seems like he may be getting the most out of not as strong of a weapon. So
yeah, like cool. he's gotten the points, even if he hasn't always gotten the best better performance than his teammate. He's still got more points than K-Mag has 2 and Hulkenberg has 6. So I mean,
There you go.
like I said, it's not drastic in terms of points, but
Mm-hmm.
when neither guy is finishing in the points very often, definitely something to look at. But
higher than Haas has been before, and that's what is kind of interesting about it.
yeah, and so I'd love to hear perspectives of anyone tuning in. If there's someone that you guys think is the best of the rest out of that top 4 teams, we'd love to hear it. Hit us up in the YouTube comments, tweet at us at Tall and Short of One on Twitter. We'd love to hear it. But to kind of move towards the F1 race weekend and everything that will not be, sadly.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, how much do you really want to say about it?
I mean, it's just it's just a big bummer. And so the kind of question that I had there, so obviously to fill everyone in who may not be in the F1 world as much, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, that whole region in Italy got hit with some ridiculous flooding, like cars underwater, and just some really, really brutal, dangerous, scary situations, which has flooded out the track and flooded out the whole area. So, pretty impossible to do a race this weekend. I saw some conversation though of like, what's the best option in this kind of scenario. Like so you have to cancel the race. It makes sense, but there are other tracks that are relatively close, Mugello and some other ones in Germany and all. Could they have potentially, and they're not, but could they have potentially like pivoted the weekend and shipped everyone to a new track and all, close by and everything, that is in the condition for like race that's already hosting other racing events and everything. I'm not saying like just chuck them anywhere that's not set up for Formula One, but to go to a track that's hosted Formula One races, that's nearby and in a position that they could host a race, like, does that make sense? I saw other people posing the idea of trying to get all of the drivers to do a fun like virtual like sim Grand Prix on the Emilia Romagna circuit, where they get all the drivers to do a little LAN party and and
It's so funny that fans think it's like a snow day for these people.
Yeah, like I was like,
that's insane.
But I was thinking about it, and I'm like, it's such a tough situation, because one, like, you're losing out on a race for all these fans that have bought tickets, bought flights, bought hotel rooms, everything to try and go there and everything. It sucks in general for all the people, and hopefully everyone being safe in that region of Italy where there's just this like dangerous flooding and flash floods and massive amounts of water that are making it next to impossible to like go anywhere. Alpine was had to leave their hotel because as a precaution because of the severe rainfall, to avoid any potential risk of danger and everything in the area. I just don't know if there's like I don't know if there's a happy solution. And I kind of agree with you. This person that said that it would be awesome to have like a virtual Grand Prix streamed online or whatever and everything. Like, I get that he's like, oh well, let's like try and make the best of a crappy situation, but like you said, like, there's such a balance. Like, does that just like rub into the like salt in the wounds of all these people who are dealing with this actual like natural disaster? Like, that you're like, well, we can't go and race there because you guys have that to deal with. But like, let's do it online. Like, I was like, I don't know if that's like very thoughtful to like the
Right.
people who and everyone who's dealing with like the reality of the situation. But also, like you said, like it's not a snow day where they're just like, well, let's stay home, and they're just like, I keep practicing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you think they're gonna use that time to like effectively go play video games with their friends? Like, no, they're just gonna be like, okay, great. Like, we have another week now. Scrap that. Now we start prepping for what's next. I think Monaco's
Yep.
next.
So Monaco's next weekend.
Yeah, so like you think, yeah, no, 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 no. They're just on to the next thing. As far as their race calendar, and then it is a little bit of this solidarity thing where it's like, yeah, I mean, if this town can't, because part of the message was like you can't rush the like emergency responders and the people in that area. Like, you can't rush that cleanup, whatever's got to get done to get these people
Oh,
safe and
absolutely
taken
not.
care of. So like, I think in the spirit of um thinking, what am I trying to say? Like, yeah, you're right. It is not very thoughtful where it's like, no, we should, if anything, because these people can't be involved, nobody should be involved, and we will just convene at the next one, but understand, like, yeah, yeah, part of the racing community, part of like our community to a certain degree is like in trouble. So no, we're not gonna like you said, just go celebrate over here with some like video game
Yeah.
party. Like, yeah, that is that. Even thinking about it more now, that even sounds kooky.
The only way that I could see that even being remotely like okay in terms of like would be if they did something as a fundraiser for the people
Right.
in that area or something like that. Or even if like some of the drivers wanted to just like do something like that, that would be awesome. But like you said, they still have a full season and a race next week that they have to prepare for, along with
Unfortunately.
the fact that I mean, and not making light of the situation in Imola at all, but these teams, a lot of them, Aston Martin had a huge upgrade package planned for the race this weekend. So did Mercedes. Mercedes, this is their first big switch, I believe, where they're going to be starting to pivot car design towards the side pod design and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was an opportunity that those teams were planning to bring these things and kind of push into the season. Now they're that and I think to speak to your point especially about like the teams having to focus on the upcoming races and all, these teams are now having to figure out these upgrade packages and if they're going to work at Monaco, potentially the biggest outlier in terms of racing on the entire calendar, where it is just like, to be honest, I don't know if I would. I mean, I guess you bring the upgrade packages anyway, but like the effects that and the lack of information that you have by missing out on getting to test those things going into such a bizarre circuit in the scheme of
Mm-hmm.
Formula One at this point,
Mm-hmm.
or just an outlier of a circuit, kind of puts you in a weird position on the team side. So I'm sure there's a lot of figuring out that they have to do on that technical side as well.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure though, and this is just like I'm kind of asking you, is upgrade doesn't necessarily mean like spec, in the sense that I've heard them say like, oh, there's like a specific package that they'll bring for this track.
Right. So it's different than
Upgrades
that.
withstanding.
Upgrades would be different. So spec for different tracks typically. So There
It's
are
like what
only
wing size you bring.
right,
Mm-hmm.
or like the uh, what's it called, the rake of the car, and which isn't really as much of a thing anymore, but it is still to some extent. But yeah, some of those like minor changes that you can make on parts of the car that are not as regulated, I guess, if that makes sense in a way. Like there are certain numbers of changes you can make and upgrades that you can make for aero, for the chassis, for the floor, and
Mm-hmm.
everything. There's like a limit to, and you can't. Another part of it, you aren't allowed to bring more than a certain amount of upgrades to a race. Like Mercedes can't just be like, oh, here's 50 new things for the car for the next race. Like they can only
Mm.
make so many changes for the next race, and then we'll have to continue to like build on that.
Gotcha.
And like on the side of that too, like what they build on those things, sometimes they need to know what the results of actually driving the car in those in the real world and not just on the sim, how that actually works.
Sure.
And so like I don't know, like if they were bringing these upgrades to Imola and everything, even though the race doesn't happen, do those count, or is that now their upgrade for Monaco and they're not allowed to bring other upgrades for Monaco because they didn't like there's a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
technical side that's
Mm-hmm.
like very thrown out of whack with a
Mm.
situation like this,
Okay, that's good. I gotcha.
where a race is canceled, and I don't know what the answer is, because like can they just bring like double upgrades to Monaco that we haven't seen, or are they just stuck being like, oh well, this is the next race, so you can only bring those upgrades to the, like, if you actually have a race kind of thing.
I mean, just thinking about it, you probably can't stack upgrades if the race never happened, you know?
That's what I would imagine. Honestly,
Unfortunately.
I would think that everything just gets pushed back a
Mm-hmm.
race in terms of um, that change and upgrade to the car and everything.
Development cycle.
Yeah. So I
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. I guess we'll probably hear a little bit, but like
So,
yeah, like Aston Martin, Mercedes were both looking to bring pretty big upgrades for
mm-hmm.
their performance. So we'll have to see what happens then. And especially with Mercedes, they were not even planning to fully test the
Oh, fuck.
upgrades. I think they're only going to test the upgrades for like FP3 and then the race.
Hmm.
They weren't even going to do it for like the full race weekend.
Hmm.
So now they're flying a little bit blind into Monaco.
So maybe the runs will, or maybe the feeling will be similar to Baku with the first sprint race, in the sense that teams were feeling like, oh, we don't have enough time. Oh, we feel like, we don't have enough
Yeah,
data.
I think
I think
we'll
we
definitely hit
get like
that.
those vibes.
Yeah, that's I think a great way to describe it. I think we'll see that a lot during the Monaco race weekend, where teams are. I will probably see a lot of that aerodynamic paint and things like that on cars to try and
Hmm.
figure out what is working and how it's working on these race cars. The sim environment and wind tunnels only can do so much, but yeah. So with the Grand Prix unfortunately being canceled, we won't have a race this weekend, and just hopefully everyone over there in that region in Italy is doing their best to stay safe in the circumstances and all.
Thinking about just like what we could do, not we, but what they could do, like in place of, if this happens, the idea would be like, well, you obviously can't do it for this weekend, But would there be an infrastructure that Formula One could put into place where tracks that have a history of weather-related concerns, do you put a backup location on the calendar? Obviously, that probably has like budget implications, time, like calendar implications,
I
obviously. But
mean,
just thinking about like instead of like, oh, how do we still like make this race happen? Like it would have to be a system that you set up beforehand
right. Yeah.
where there's many parties in agreement as to
Right.
like what the next step is. And without a
Or
system like that, yeah, I think you just cancel and just move on.
yeah, or is there a way that you slide it back in later in the schedule once everything is like more back to normal circumstances? Or I think you just
Yeah,
have
what
to
are we thinking?
I think you might just have to cancel it and move on, and it's just an unfortunate circumstance of Mother Nature.
Sure, no,
But
but I actually like what you're saying, where you slot it back in later, but we get them outside the car, we throw them in a gym, we give them some sneakers, and you say, all right, well, this one, you're running.
there you go.
50 laps, go ahead,
All right.
and we'll see who the fastest racer really is. I bet it'd be Yuki
I
Tsunoda. He's got less mass to carry around. He'd probably be pretty quick.
shorter legs though.
That's true. Okay, then probably George Russell.
I was gonna say he's got those long legs. Man's
Yeah.
lanky.
Ocon, he's got legs too. So yeah, we would have to figure out some interesting scenario. We could have them joust. We could do the Emilia Romagna joust. That would be interesting.
Yeah, do they ride horses or do they just run at each other? Or no, they scooter at each other.
There you go.
Except for the fact that scooters were banned on track. So
Add like a karting clause in if
yeah,
rained out, karting at like Moe's Funhouse or whatever it would be.
there you go. I
Yeah.
think we've solved it.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm surprised Twitter didn't get this far.
Yeah,
They need our brain power, dude.
I I think I might find those kinds of comments if I really start digging down to the bottom of the
Sorry,
replies.
if you look for the real brains of the conversation, you
Exactly.
probably find these.
Exactly. Geniuses are never respected in their time, you know?
That's what I say, dude. They'll love me when I'm dead.
Exactly. Oh my god. But with there not being a race, there's not much more to say this week with F1. But looking at MSI, we had a lot of games that happened over the past week. I think the biggest banger of a series, Gen G versus T1, was a spicy little matchup there.
Oh, damn. I'm surprised you didn't want to start with the C9 series, dude.
Oh, what? C9 play? What?
Ooh, actually.
Actually,
Damn.
which C9, which 3-0 do you want to talk about?
So bad that they had to get beat up a whole bunch. But no, I'm sorry to cut you off. I agree. The Gen G T1 series was very exciting. But yeah, just some other like some of the same that we've been talking about with some of the other matchups. I think some like takeaways that you could pull for the losing squad, but overall just some dominance that
Yeah,
we've seen.
and I think this is like we're at the point where obviously it's the mid-season invitational. There is a whole nother split for everyone before we go into Worlds, but I think it's a good barometer of where we're at in terms of performance. So like looking at some of the different matchups and everything that we had over the past week and all, C9 faced off against Billy Gaming. We saw the 3-0 there, but it was, you and I talked about it, it was a closer 3-0. Like C9 had multiple opportunities in different games to to kind of pull out a victory here and there that they just weren't able to make happen. And I think where I am kind of landing with some of these series, we had C9 lose 3-0 to Billy Gaming. We had JDG 3-0 Golden Guardians. The Eastern regions, the LPL and the LCK, were kind of seeing where they differentiate themselves from the Western teams in EU and North America, where the laning phases, the quality of players, and I think I'll double yeah. So Azael had tweeted out yesterday. He said, "I don't think individually the Western teams are that much worse than the LPL and LCK. We're able to consistently create leads in many games and put ourselves in winning situations. That being said, the difference in coordination and team fighting is astronomical." And that is like, from watching these series, that's what I was seeing. It's the cohesion and like pure decisiveness that you're seeing from these LPL and LCK teams when they have those opportunities to it seems like in those matchups with the Western teams, they always make the right choice of when to fight and how to engage, and they are all so cohesive as they're going and doing that. It doesn't matter if C9 is up 2,000 gold at 15 minutes or whatever, because all it takes is that one team fight. And once they steamroll one team fight from just purely outplaying in that 5v5 fight, they're taking dragons, they're taking barons, they're pushing towers, they are just ballooning their gold lead so stinking quickly that we don't see that in North America, or from what I've watched this year of EU, to the point that I don't think these teams like Cloud9, G2, like I feel like they almost don't know how to react, because they're like, oh, well, we messed up that one team fight in EU or the LCS. That just means, okay, like we'll just like all respawn and we'll go out and we'll get our resources and then we'll like take the next objective fight. And with these games, it's like, no, there is no next objective fight. You've lost all your vision. You have zero map control. You don't have resources to get because your jungle's been stolen. There's no objective on the map because you just lost two of them in that one team fight getting aced. And the game's over now. Like, it is just, it feels like a different game sometimes when you see the back and forth that we saw between Gen G and T1, and then you see Gen G versus C9, and and albeit that happened this morning, so I have not rewatched that, but 3-0 in what was it? A long 27 minutes, a long 25 minutes, and a long 26 minutes. Like, those are quick games with very brutal score lines. And it just seems like, in this instance, Gen G obviously was one of the top three teams we saw going into the tournament. I am not shocked that they 3-0'd C9. I'm not shocked that it was brutal. At the same time, C9 played and hung with Billy Gaming, the LPL's second team, for a good bit. But similarly, once they got those definitive team fights in that series, those games were just done.
Well, and I think part of the team fighting does come down to, and you alluded to it, like the ward coverage, where they're called out by flanks a good bit. Some of the teleports that these top laners are able to pull off, and some of the mid laners. Just a level of coordination that kind of goes above and beyond what we're seeing from these teams. And unfortunately, I think the biggest glaring difference for me in like the Gen G series specifically this morning against with Cloud9 was honestly, bro, jungle diff, man. Like Blabber was back to just looking like he has never been punished for anything before. Like he was making some really, really wild decisions that like don't help his team out at all. So from a certain degree, some of the moments in that series felt like a 4v5 or a 5v4 for Genji,
Well,
where Blabber just
and that's kind of like what happens to some extent in like this is a huge, it's a mismatch. The only area in this lineup where I could say maybe you could have like just slightly leaning towards the Genji side is in the bot lane and in the top lane. Like Berserker, I think, and Pays are on a pretty similar level. Fudge, I think, is slightly below Doran, but I don't think he's too far off. The mid lane matchup and not Blabber is one of the best American junglers that we have ever seen come through LCS. He is a LCS phenom. Peanut in this whole tournament, not just this series, has been playing out of his mind. He has been playing so well. He was, in my opinion, looking at the series with T1, him and Chovy were the only reasons that they had a shot in that series in my eyes. Like Peanuts engages his just like through and through in that series. I felt like when they were getting opportunities to lead, it was him and Chovy making those plays, dragging out fights, outlasting. Especially his play on the Wukong in that series, he looked really, really solid on in games 3 and 4. But I think like that was I feel like Peanut is playing almost at his like best right now, and that matchup was not even in the jungle there. No matter how good I think Blabber is, Peanut playing at his best is just it's a fact that it's better than Blabber playing at his best.
Dude, fair, but I'm saying like Blabber didn't even show up. Like it was a whole bunch of unforced errors and just like poor decision making. So
Yeah.
like yeah,
Well,
I understand.
but
like,
that happens too.
But,
Like I think that it all,
bro, when it happens like three bracket stages in a row for a player, that's when you have to look at it and say like he needs a sports psychologist, man. He has some kind of block about that like main
international
stage bracket
tournaments and
where he just like folds to these teams.
Yeah,
And he didn't even look that bad against like Billy Gaming, but
right.
you know, is it that star power like, oh fuck no, I'm up against Peanut, like there's no way I'm gonna be able to, and then you just
it might
like, is that Blabber?
I mean, I guess like I definitely get what you're saying, and I'm with you on it. Because he hasn't performed the way that I would like in this tournament. I kind of expected Fudge to be the rock, Blabber to be the playmaker, and Berserker to just go nuts. Like that those are the keys to victory for Cloud9. M&S is a solid mid laner. I think if he can hold even and not get put too far behind in the mid lane, like, and just like I'm not expecting them to win through his play. I'm not expecting Sven to be the game changer from support. I expect Sven to be good, but I expect M&S to be good, but I'm not expecting them to be the dominating pieces. And Blabber didn't. I just think in this series specifically against Gen G, I think he was outmatched anyway, and whether he played to his ceiling or towards his ceiling, as opposed to the way he played based on, like I said, I haven't watched it yet. I believe you though in terms of what you're saying. I trust your opinions. I think the result would not have been that different, based on how Peanuts playing.
You're right. It wouldn't. You're right. It totally wouldn't. It probably would still be a 3-0, like with Blabber's best day. It just like from a Cloud9 that I kind of actually agree with you. Like if you look at some of those games, like 2 out of 3 games, like M&S was outseeing Chovy. Arguably Chovy played Nautilus in game 1, so like he's not really CSing at all. But I'm just saying, like in the other roles, it did not feel as much of a gap, and especially with this feeling that, like, from what I know about Fudge is he's gonna play to the level that his opponent is,
right,
like, pretty much every single time.
Yes.
So you actually gain some confidence there. So, like, if Blabber was just able to
do
help
that
out a little bit,
well, if he could just do that and play up to his competition, and like that's the it's like the crux for so many like teams. Like I've seen it in college football, I've seen it in like basketball, I've seen it in every sport that there is. There are some players that like, and some teams that, like, good or bad, play to the level of their opponent to some extent.
right?
Whether that's bringing their own play down to play that level or bringing their play up to reach that challenge. And Blabber, unfortunately, is just like almost a good day, bad day kind of guy, where like when he's like good, he can be that like Fudge and play up to the best competition's level, or at least like close there. But then on his bad days, he's just bad. Like he's not playing to like the opponent's level has no effect on him. On a bad day, he's just, it's a bad day.
Yeah, he's like he'll lose the game himself.
Yeah, and so maybe a sports psychologist would help. I think I wouldn't be surprised if C9 has one, but I would hope that they I would hope that they work on it. I was also like, though, I looked at the drafts and everything going into this. Little disappointed with the emphasis on the Lucian Nami from Cloud9 in game 2 and 3 there. It isn't a bad pick, but I feel like it has fallen pretty heavily out of this meta, and it's so reliant on you winning the bot lane. And like I said, yes, I expect Berserker to play really well, but I don't expect Sven to necessarily be like winning them games in the bot lane. So going for that, in game 2, Zyra Khan beats Lucian Nami. It's a better duo in the bot lane. The Jinx in general right now is much, much higher priority in my opinion than the Lucian. I don't see why Berserker wasn't potentially opting for like an Aphelios or one of these other picks that seems to match up better in this MSI meta to the Xayah and Jinx and those champions that we're seeing. It wasn't banned. It wasn't like the Blitzcrank was left open that we've been seeing. And yeah, like I don't know Sven's experience on Blitzcrank, but there are other champions that I think, looking at their draft, I would have preferred saying to that Lucian Nami. That Lucian Nami feels like such a if we don't crush, we lose.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a desperation lane pick.
Yeah, like you're hoping to all of a sudden pivot to your game to entirely like win through bot lane, as opposed to just kind of like I feel like it almost was a bad shift in play style that was like very reactionary, as opposed to like just playing the way that they've played. I mean, game one was the longest game that they had, and they had Aphelios Lulu in the bot lane that game. Seems a little bit more in the wheelhouse of like what we've been seeing than their champion picks in game 2 and 3. I mean, and we did have like a little bit of a pivot from Chovy in game 2, picking the Vex, but yeah, I just think that there are some bigger issues to work out for Cloud9, but in general, things kind of ended up as expected in terms of that. Looking at G2 though, G2 kind of very similar position. They get 3-1'd by Billy Gaming. A matchup that they could have potentially, like, kind of like C9's 3-0 that they lost to Billy Gaming. Like, there were win conditions that C9 and G2 both had in those matchups there, and just didn't pull it out. Billy Gaming out team fought them, and then like in the crucial moments, and was able to win those games. I think it was the Baron for G2 in the second game, if I remember correctly, that just went poorly for them, and all of a sudden Billy Gaming turned that game around and goes ahead. Or maybe it was game 3, I can't remember which one. But yeah, I think a lot of the expected, but yeah, my big takeaway from watching this and seeing our regions get knocked out was really the big differences in terms of like what happens after those team fight wins. Like even in the LCS, like Cloud9 will win team fights and they'll close out games pretty quickly sometimes, but not as decisively as we see some of the LPL and LCK teams doing. And then also, I think it's a unfortunate circumstance of us not having that many international competitions that C9 doesn't have that many opportunities to learn. Oh, if we get behind, or if they beat us in a team fight at 30 minutes in the game, how do we come back and kind of stop the bleeding and try and pull ourselves back in, as opposed to just being like, oh, we lost this and now they gained so much gold and we just crush under that pressure that these teams are bringing. And that's a hard thing to learn when you don't have the opportunity to play against teams that can just do that to you.
Yeah, and also like, and that's just from the what would you say? That's just from like the kind of macro decision making. Maybe it's about like the voices in the team, communication, unsure about calls. We can't be sure what goes on.
Right. It could be it could be like difference in like you said with communication, like C9 Gen G is a team of all Korean players. C9, you have European players, you have Korean players, you have American players. Like, there are a number of different first languages on that team, as opposed to most teams in the LPL or the LCK having strictly one language as their primary language. There's no communication issues when it comes to that. So I don't know if that's a potential thing as well.
It could be. I guess what I was bringing up was like to kind of contrast these weaknesses with like what that looks like for a team. Like, okay, so they're not that great at like these team fights or whatever, but what does it look like to be good at them? And I think game three of JDG versus Billy Gaming was kind of the perfect example of that. Like in that game, the team fighting from JDG was so crisp in the sense that Billy Gaming had the double hook composition with the jacks to kind of dive buddy in on Aphelios for just massive damage, and then Shun on the Nidalee, who was like doing pretty decent damage, had the capacity in melee form like to do to chunk out. Billy Gaming, they were actually able to find some really good engages onto JD Gaming, but it was the like mid team fight communication and decision making that you could see like in real time them adjusting their positioning and like just getting in between the BLG members and ruler and the way they were like being patient with cooldowns for shields, like coming in to support when, you know, one's dash was down. All right, now you see like Sejuani move backwards, and then Sejuani eats an ultimate, but then, you know, you'll see 369 on the K'Sante like dash forward, and now he's in the front lines, and all the while just ruler, just never without a shield, never without protection, just free firing the whole time. And it's like the only way to describe teams like when they kind of achieve this like state, like they're a hive mind effectively. Like they're all like kind of the same being for a
Yep.
short amount of time, and that I it feels like is the level of cohesion that NA and European squads are not able to reach. Like, no matter how good they look in their home region, something about the cohesion is like never able to click. But I think that third map of the JDG series was just like masterclass team fighting of just how to play that standard front to back, you know, double tank, caster mid laner, enchanter support, and just let the hyper carry go crazy. And
Yeah.
they picked for it, they played for it, and then they team fought for it, and it was wild to watch because like Billy Gaming like actually did their best to get on top of Ruler. Bin has a positive KD in that game. He's 6-4-8. He was actually able to threaten that backline a lot of times. So it took JDG having to like literally team fight themselves out of these like bad positions that BLG was able to get them in. So not only do they have to like shore up these just like individual weaknesses and figure out like what to do past 15 minutes if we have a gold lead, like how to set up for these team fights, like then they've got to learn how to actually team fight in this way for what it seems like a bot focused meta where like you have to just play that front to back, try and get a hyper carry, and just keep that guy alive. Because if they are alive at the end of the team fight, you're going to win it. You're
Yep.
going to win it with Jinx rockets and the Aphelios fucking white and red guns. Bro, keep them alive and they will make all your money for you.
Oh yeah.
So, to going all the way back to your point about Cloud9 with the Lucian Nami bottom lane, is like you have some idea of what you're supposed to be doing is playing for bottom lane dominance, but you're not actually doing it in the right way. Like, what are you doing putting M&S on LeBlanc? Bro, we're not winning games through the mid lane here. Like,
Right.
trust me, we're not winning games through the mid lane.
Yep.
So they are not even understanding how you're supposed to be playing the game at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like trying to pick for this strong bottom lane, but they're not ever taking that gun out of its holster. So like from that angle, it's pretty frustrating to see these things, especially when Ruler just gets to like, dude, he was literally just closing his eyes, just firing, and he was just hitting targets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from that perspective, I think we've got a lot to learn, and like just
just to tag on that point, like, bro, JDG looks fucking scary at this point in the tournament.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, so that's kind of where I was, where I'm glad the conversation was going to. So, like to digress about the kind of like looking at T1, Gen G, and JDG, these top three teams in the tournament, they're all playing phenomenally well. The series with T1 and Gen G, if you didn't see it, people go back and watch it. It was a banger of a series. T1 goes up 2-0. Gen G fights it back to 2-2. T1 takes it in game 5, but that was not. I mean, that is such a like just I mean, a short synopsis of the series. Like, they were back and forth, and both teams played extremely well, taking good advantages and all. JD Gaming is a little bit of an outlier to some extent for me at this moment because I don't know what their level truly is. Yes, I know that Billy Gaming 3-0'd C9 and 3-1'd G2. I expected Billy Gaming to beat both of those teams.
Yeah, I don't think they've like really been well,
JDG versus Billy Gaming, I don't like. JDG was better than Billy Gaming the entire split in the LPL. Like, I'm not surprised that's a 3-0 either. I think that JDG's got a better team than Billy Gaming, and just that's the fact of the matter. But because JDG's played Golden Guardians and Billy Gaming, who we already have seen them play and beat,
yeah.
they are a little bit of an unknown going into this T1 matchup, which is exciting. They have looked so clean and so crisp. Yes, they have not been challenged that hard, but to not falter in the slightest in those circumstances, their mindset, they didn't have any slip ups in those two series where they were like, oh well, we just like a little bit of a bad game or whatever. Like, they have had no issue going through those first couple matchups, and to stack up against T1, I think this is where we'll kind of get to see. I think if JDG beats T1, JDG's winning it all. I don't, and like obviously they still have to wait to see the outcome of Gen G and Billy Gaming, and then if JDG wins the winner of that versus T1 to go to the finals. But it also could be that T1 goes and cleans their clock. Like, I just don't. I don't have a good gauge of their competition because they haven't played anyone that I feel like was on their level yet. Whereas Gen G and T1, we got to see them match up, and that was a 5-game series. They are both on a very equal playing field in terms of quality of players, knowledge of the macro, knowledge of the meta, and just the execution that they have for their team comps. Going into this one with JDG and T1 is going to be really, really exciting to watch.
Well, let me give you a wrinkle here. Do you remember the LCK finals that just happened where Gen G beat T1 3-1? So
That was after T1 had beat them earlier in the playoffs, correct? That was the Gen G. If I remember correctly, came back through. I'll double.
Yes.
But Gen G came back through, and so T1 beat Gen G 3-1 in the semifinal, upper bracket semis, and then Gen G beat T1 3-1 in the finals.
But in that final series, it was T1 that was giving away mid and late game mistakes that Genji was then there to capitalize on and then kick in the door. So I I might I should say like this. I see a world where T1's mid and late game is not strong enough to handle what JDG is capable of at that 25-minute plus mark. Like just in a vacuum, not thinking about like what team comps they have, just thinking about like play style, where they've been strongest. Like T1 is really strong at getting early game advantages, keeping it, pushing it, and then also they have Guma and Keria that are very good at like the engages and positioning therein. But T1 has historically made some game breaking late game decisions that better teams were able to capitalize on, and we may find ourselves in similar positions,
Or even
depending on
equal teams that just are better at
Sure.
playing out those conditions. Like I think, whoa, I hit my desk. Not an
Earthquake.
earthquake. But yeah, like even just a team that maybe T1 is better at in the early stages of the game than Genji and everything. If they're on a relatively even playing field, Genji might have the upper hand in that. Like in those late game decision makings, macro and all. That's a very good point as well.
So I guess I just raised this point to say, like, as much as I want to see T1 in the finals, I definitely see a world where play styles clash here, and if it goes past 25 minutes with like Ruler just like on a Felios or Jinx or whatever, I think they're just going to be able to lock it down. Either way, though, I do agree. I think it's going to be a very exciting series. Probably like if we say Genji and T1 delivered, it seems like T1 JDG could be just as exciting.
Yeah. So and it's also like
No matter who wins.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you there, and I'm excited for it. We've got those matchups coming up. We have tomorrow T1 versus JDG at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Beautiful.
So we'll have that. I'm looking forward to that, and then we have the Billy Gaming versus Genji the following day on Friday at 8 a.m. So, yeah, I think we're gonna have a good matchup, and I do I want a prediction from you, or are we just gonna wait and see?
I mean, if you really want, I'm gonna predict T1 3-2.
T1 3-2. Okay. I'm gonna go with you there. I think that that's a good possibility. I also I'm gonna look at the Genji bill. I think Genji's gonna 3-0 Billy Gaming on that matchup. So I'll put that out there.
That seems interesting.
I just feel like if Genji and T1 are on the same level, and we're saying they're on the same level as JDG 3-0'd Billy Gaming without much chagrin there. Minus that. Oh, no, I'll take that back. Game 2 and Game 3 were 39 and 38 minutes. So Billy Gaming put up a bit of a solid fight in those, but a 3-0 nonetheless. So I'm going to go Genji with the 3-0 in that matchup.
I'm going to say 3-1 to Genji for that matchup. I think Billy Gaming will be able to win at least one board, especially if they, like,
Off
honestly,
the back
Billy...
of Bin on the Jacks, baby.
Well, I think Bin can be an X factor, but B, I think if you take Delight off of Rakan, you put him into some really like not comfortable waters with his champion picks, and when he's on Rakan, like that's when Genji does like or has their best what appears to be their best like primary engager. So I think if you ban out Delight, actually you may put them on the back foot where you put Peanut in like primary engage role, and then that just like forces him onto like Wukong the whole game.
Yeah,
or the whole series.
or if somehow Billy Gaming's able to get Elk on to the Zyuricon with him and on,
Sure.
they performed pretty well in that too. So if you could steal that away, but yeah, I think keeping I don't hate the idea of keeping Delight off the Rakan because he
I
has
think
looked
it's
really clean on it.
Yeah, I think it's arguably his best champ. So I just say that to say I think there may be keys to victory for BLG, but yeah, I think ultimately it's going to be Genji 3-1. That's my guess.
There we go. So
Got it in the books.
3-2s T1 versus JDG, and then four on T1 side, and then a 3-0 and a 3-1 for Genji versus Billy Gaming. You heard it here, folks. Any other points you wanted to hit on with the MSI before we head on to some Magic the Gathering?
Not really. I just have found the best of threes here to be like way more exciting, even though like we are getting teams that are just like starkly better than others. I do find it really engaging to have this like larger sample size of matches to talk
Yeah.
about, because then you get just a greater understanding of like why things went wrong, and where teams can improve. Because sometimes with the best ones, it's just tough to like gain like to really know what happened. Like,
Right.
wait, was it just like the Draven that they got?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can just be a little unsatisfying. So I think the quality of games may not be the highest, but this is still the funnest MSI I've had in a long time. Like
Oh,
I have to be honest.
no, I'd agree with you, and I think it's with having I like the format with the losers bracket with the double elimination. Like
Me
that's
too.
really nice. And yeah, I think seeing like you were saying, like seeing the adjustments that teams are making and everything gives a much better perspective on those teams and like where they're at as a whole. So I'm with
Agreed.
you. I've enjoyed watching these. Like it's been fun. Even though we've had a lot of lopsided series, like you said, it's been a good one. So
I agree. But no, that's just my last little comment on that. Just to talk about some Magic games that we've had. A lot of Commander recently. Good amount of just good amount of cardboard being shuffled around recently. But
nice.
I guess the main hit that I'll come at you with on Monday, we were playing some Pioneer, or I was playing some Pioneer with John, and what what would have just been like us jamming a couple games. I know he had some new decks that he wanted to try. You know, we could have just been shuffling up, but we got to a point where I guess we were talking about like a sideboard card or like, you know, this card inclusion versus that one, and I was like, well, what even is like a sideboard plan? Because I've heard him say one thing about his ideas, and I'm like, all right, well, that seems different than like what I think about it, and like what I think like these guys may think about it. So what ended up, you know, like we planned to like jam games. It ended up being way less games and us just like talking about the theory of deck building again, and like, all right, like let's talk about game plans. Like what actually is mid range? Like when you're building that, like what are your card choices? Like, oh, like thinking about the format, like what's some of the removal that you want to have, and like when you're thinking about this, do you include like these types of cards? And then we like went through the sideboard that he built like for his deck that he plays, and he was like, this is for this, and I'm when I think about this matchup. So just like it was this whole like connecting the dots kind of scenario of like learning a little bit more about the strategy
Okay.
behind the deck building choices that you make before you're even in the game. So
Gotcha.
that was cool.
Okay. Well, so
One, go ahead.
with that, I guess do you feel like you had a disconnect and that you've been enlightened now, or do you feel like it was just like two different trains of thought in terms of what the sideboard is? Because what I
Oh no, not like a
imagine.
rules question, more of like a philosophy
No.
question.
Yeah. Like
Hmm.
that's what I mean. Like what yeah, like what a sideboard is in terms of like what it's bringing to you and your deck and
Right.
everything. Because what I'm imagining is more so a in my mind it would be a, oh well, like I'm playing this deck and going for this strategy. Oh, I matched up against them and I realized this strategy may not work into this deck, so I need to have my deck built to have the ability to use my sideboard to have a alternative win condition coming from it that I can pivot in and be able to say, okay, well, that win condition, like, I think is staunchly not going to work in this matchup. So now I think this other win condition might be what I need to do to get there.
That is exactly right for John's perspective.
Okay.
That's what he does with his sideboard. He boards in a more mid-range plan that is off the combo and more grind. So he can go a little late game. He has the ability to draw some more cards,
Okay.
understand that some of his cards may get 1 for 1, so he's got to play out a longer game, deal more damage, not with the combo, but more over time.
Okay.
So your idea about it is exactly how he thinks about it and what he actively builds his sideboard to do for him.
And so then for you, based on this being different, what I imagine you were building your sideboard for was, oh, this card got negated because of X strategy of my opponent. I'm still trying to play the same deck through the same general win conditions. What can I pivot in that will possibly be able to avoid what they're doing or what they did that caused me to lose? What can I swap in that gives me, which I generally think both are
Valid.
potential. Yeah, they're both valid. I think my pivot would be, because just from all of that I've learned from talking to you about Magic and us doing this podcast and everything, I my mind always goes to having multiple win conditions and not
Mm-hmm.
going for like a singular focus with a deck where I'm saying, oh, if I don't pull the right cards, I'm like fucked. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
not I and obviously, like, if you're going to play for a certain win condition and everything, you're playing for certain cards in hand and whatnot to give you a combo and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're building your deck to wheel cards and everything to get there. But in my mind, the way that I think I look at the game, I'd probably be a little more aligned with like John's, where I'm looking at multiple, like, kind of like backup
Exactly.
strategies,
Exactly. Yeah.
auxiliary.
And just the conversation around those two different like viewpoints and what I could take away from that and like come a little further away from this like silver bullet strategy that I had in mind and more of like, well, maybe I can just have like a different plan that may surprise them for game two,
Mm.
and then I can grab my wins that way. So yeah, just the conversation about these two different strategies was very interesting, and I think just helped kind of illuminate my own ideas about the format and deck building moving forward. And then that'll inform play moving forward as well.
It's
Then
it
I have different tools.
Yeah, well, which I like, because I mean, I think it's obviously great, like, having someone to just bounce ideas off with that and everything. So
Very much
it's
so.
cool that you guys are like able to get together and do that. Um, it's so interesting though, because both also just have purely the same built-in flaw, to some extent, like built in, like it's a built into the game flaw, which causes the difficulty, and that is, okay, so say you go your strategy and you get beat by a guy, and he pulled a card that just like stumped your win condition and everything, and you're like, well, I'm gonna put in an instant into this so that if I get it in my hand, I can negate that thing. Well, the wrinkle with all of that, great plan. That's what you want to do. He can just fucking shift his plan too, which is the built-in
the mind game,
which is the difficult part, because you could pivot that in, and then he just takes that card out and swaps something in that does something different, and now all of a sudden what you put in doesn't do it. Similarly with John's strategy, okay, well, I'm going to pivot to this other option. If that other guy is like, well, I beat him with this, so he's probably going to change, and shifts up their strategy, they might just have another strategy that just happens to beat yours. Like, even like you're pivoting, but you don't know what they're like, because you don't know what each other are bringing from your side. You know what's in the sideboard, but you don't know what they're, because you have the deck lists for the tournament, but you don't know what they're bringing in game to game or pulling out and whatnot.
Right.
So
wonderful mind games that can occur in those scenarios, and that's why we play. That's why we love it.
That's fun.
So yeah, just a bunch of good Magic games. Happy to learn about my decks, his decks, deck choices in general. So yeah, just a good time. But that's kind of my weekly Magic recap here for you.
Oh, very cool. I always like hearing about it. It's I think if I was a man with more time on my hands, it would be something that I could really dig in, because it's such a cool game. It has so many possibilities. I also, unfortunately, just don't know if my mind is built for it, because the memory that is in this head, like, I watched the T1 and Gen G series and took no notes. I was just like watching it, and I had all these things going through my mind about this and that and everything, and I was just sitting there like, well, I'm not gonna remember these things for the podcast.
Sure, of course.
like I just for whatever reason my brain doesn't retain those things. It retains concepts. It doesn't retain as much of the
details.
Yeah, a little bit. So, but nonetheless, very very cool. I enjoy hearing about the Magic and everything. So any Pioneer tournaments or anything coming up soon? Or just play nights?
There's a night on Saturday coming up that I may be able to win some games. I've got John picking up a couple singles for me to make like one or two swaps in the list that I think may help,
Nice.
especially for the matchups that I have at the store. So yeah, some games coming up on Saturday that I'll be able to talk about next episode.
Cool. Looking forward to hearing about it. But why don't we, I guess, switch on over to the flavor of the week and start wrapping this thing out of here.
Tell me about it. Give us yours.
Sounds good. So for my food this week, I have a couple things that tie together a little bit, but Colleen and her friend went to Taylor Swift on Sunday. So her friend came over before the concert, and we got just a bunch of sushi, and I just love sushi. So we have a place we like nearby. We ordered like, I don't know, 7 rolls and an appetizer and everything between the 3 of us, crushed out. And for some reason, like, I am just get all the leftovers. Like, they got full, and I was just like, ooh, more for me. So I was just crushing through some sushi, which I always love. But then for my music, I have to say, so there was a thing that came out this past week. Last week, Lil Wayne,
In the news line again.
But this past week, it was there was a thing that I saw that he had a show and apparently stopped it after 30 minutes and just like left because he was disappointed in the crowd's energy. Which was a huge bummer after I just hyped him up and everything to be like, Because I guarantee that there were multiple, like, even if the overall crowd energy was poor, there were people in there that fucking love him, that were probably having the best time of their lives seeing him, and then he just dipped out. And that's where I was just like, because not everyone in the audience was probably sitting there yawning, like, but the people who were pissed him off enough that the people who do love him and wanted to see him and were having a hype time, like, got screwed out of it. So I was disappointed with his decision to do that. That kind of sucks. But that also, like, I had that in the comparison to, I heard a lot of Taylor Swift this past week, and of course with leading up to Colleen going to the concert, and she like crushes it. Like, Colleen showed me some videos and everything, but just like she had 3 nights here in Philadelphia, 3 hours she performed back to back to back nights, like, not including her, like, opening acts and everything. Like, she herself did 3 hours of music, and that is impressive, and I respect it big time, even though she's not my, like, favorite artist personally to listen to. Like, the amount, and I don't dislike her. I hear her plenty, and I'm still alive. But the fact that she takes that much time and effort for her fans who are, like, coming to see her shows and everything, big respect to her. So got to give her a little shout out in my music for this week. And then for my visual medium, weird throwback. I realized that HBO Max has a ton of the old Batman animated shows, and I remember all of the ones from my childhood that I used to watch. When I was like 4, I got a Batman costume for Christmas. I had this Batman computer game. I've got the action figures, the Batmobile, Wayne Manor, all still at my parents' house. They've got them all in the attic there. But
Okay.
I started watching back through Batman the animated series.
Okay.
From like the early 90s. It's very gritty, very, like, the animation, it's 90s animation. It's not phenomenal, but I've just been enjoying it because I saw that they have all these things, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, like, slowly work through these kind of in order. Like, I want to go through that. I want to go and rewatch Batman Beyond, the like futuristic Batman one where Bruce Wayne's retired and a new kid on the block shows up. I've got the whole I've got the whole, like, plan, but I've been going through Batman the animated series and just, like, watching it as I go to bed, fall asleep, because it's like if I miss little bits in here and there, I'm not devastated. But it's funny to see how it differs from, like, current day shows and things like that. It's very much like each episode is like a comic book just turned into a TV show. It's like, this episode is Batman versus Batman versus the Joker, and the next one is Batman versus the Crocodile Man, and Batman versus, so it's kind of funny that it's like a different concept. There's not like a steady cohesion through the series or like a overarching plot as much as it's like, this episode's one comic, this episode's another comic, and you just kind of go through. So I've just enjoyed that a bit, but that is my flavor of the week for this week.
Well, and this was the one that I was thinking of where Mark Hamill voices the Joker.
So Mark Hamill did the Joker in a lot of the Batman shows, as well as the video games. I think he was the Joker in Arkham Asylum as well. He's done a lot of the voiceovers, so yeah, big fan of him doing that.
Well, and when you get consistency like that, like, you know how people talk about, like, this baseball broadcaster is like, he was the voice of my childhood.
Oh yeah.
Like, to a certain degree, like, when if you picture the Joker's voice in your head, like, that's crazy that you hear, like, this guy, like Mark Hamill, he's just like a guy. He wakes up in the morning just like us, but in your mind, like, that's who embodies the Joker for
Oh
you,
yeah.
which is like a beautiful little thing that happens
Oh,
with like
absolutely.
movies and shows. So yeah,
Absolutely.
shout out Mark Hamill for his beautiful voice acting that he's done for that over the years.
Definitely.
But yeah, flavor of the week here, my music, going back to an oldie but a goodie. We were listening to Logic Under Pressure.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Bro, it slaps
Dude, it's
still.
a great
Like his
album.
his production is like really exciting, even like this many years later. He was definitely on to something. That album, very good. My food here for the week. We did a homemade chicken bacon ranch steak sandwich.
Okay.
Sarah made a homemade chipotle ranch. Mixing
Ooh.
like
Oh yeah.
adobo peppers in there, bro. In something else, like it was actually
Oh,
very spicy.
that
Big
sounds so
fan.
good.
And then visual medium, I've got two here for you. Blast TV premiere Paris, the last CS:GO major before we move on to CS2.
Oh,
We are moving into, I guess, what's now like the champion stages. So all the group stages, all that stuff's over. We're into the quarterfinals now. We got 4 quarterfinals set up, a couple of
nice.
semis to go. So yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think we're set up to have like a really, really exciting playoff stage. So I've been following that. That's gonna wrap up this weekend, and
Nice.
then as somebody very similar to somebody who should be doing their homework for one subject is off independent studying another subject. So when I should be learning about Pioneer Magic, I've been taking coffee breaks over in the Legacy MTG lounge and watching a format that I should not be paying attention to. I should be learning about this other thing that I'm like supposed to be getting practice on, but constantly I'm just like, well, let me go check out what Reed Duke's doing over in these legacy games.
You
So
just
yeah,
like
not
Magic, man. Nothing wrong
I
with
do.
that. It
I
it
do. I
it
just like
like
Magic.
intrigues you. That's cool. So I can't fault you for that. Even though it may not be the most productive use of your time in terms of your personal goals with Pioneer, still fun.
Yeah, it is just very enjoyable.
Yeah, of
And I knew you wouldn't judge me. That's why I felt safe to bring it up.
course.
But yeah, that is my flavor of the week here, sir.
Nice. Well, of course, as always, ladies and gents, that does bring us to the end of our episode for the week. We appreciate you guys listening. I know we unfortunately don't have much with the canceled Grand Prix to talk about, but we're looking forward to digging into what we're looking ahead to Monaco for next week. Everyone stay safe
8500.
over there in the region of Italy. Hopefully, I doubt we have any listeners over there, but if we do, stay safe. Yeah, just we're looking forward to bringing you the podcast week after week. Hit us up on Twitter. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts at Tall and Short of One, the number one on Twitter. But we'd love to hear from you guys and appreciate your support.
Yeah, just tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. Aaron just told you where to find us. This has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Peace out.
See ya.